Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give all of our attendees just a couple more minutes to join, and then we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone who's just joining us. We're just giving everyone a few minutes to get settled and logged in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone who's just joining. We're just giving everybody a minute or two to get on and get settled, and then we will begin. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I am Donna Phelps. I am the moderator of our panel. I'm very excited to welcome the following speakers today. We have Jessica Culloo, BCBA LABA. We have Danielle Ashley-Silva, BCBA LABA, and Libby Mendizabal, BA, who are going to be sharing all kinds of information with you today about next steps, clear paths, what to do after an autism diagnosis. Just a few quick housekeeping things. The chat function is not working. If you have any questions throughout the talk today, please use the Q&A function. We will be monitoring that and answering questions as we go. And I also appreciate how many of you submitted questions with your registration. We will also be incorporating answers to those questions as we go. We are recording today's talk, and the slides will be made available to you after today's presentation. If you are interested in gaining access to the slides and the recording, please email Gary Dorsey. You should have his email from when you signed up for this webinar. Again, thank you so much for joining, and I will turn it over to our first panelist.
Hello, everyone. My name is Libby Mendizabal. And just to echo Donna, we're so thankful to have you here today. Um, we're going to be going over a few different things. I'll be taking care of the first section of how to access services. Jess will be taking the second section of things for available supports while you wait on the wait lists. And then Danielle will be taking the last section of best practices to add into your home before ABA begins. So we hope that this is very valuable information for all of you. And like Donna said, please ask any and all questions that you have in the Q&A function. We'll be happy to take some time and answer all of your questions for you. So we're going to hop right in because we have a lot to go over. I know we have the hour and a half, but it's going to go by quick, I promise. With how to access services. This is oftentimes a barrier for people. You get the diagnosis, and then people give you all of these services that you should really be doing for your child and don't explain any of them or anything. to you or what the documentation is. So I'm hoping that this can provide a little bit of clarity of how to do kind of that paperwork administrative side of things. The first thing we're going to go over is making sense of the paperwork. A lot of times when you're given a new diagnosis of autism, you're given a very, very dense stack of paperwork filled with acronyms and specific jargon and very odd math you've never seen before, and no one really explains it to you or tells you what's important to keep. So I have a list here. It's not an exhaustive list. It's just some essentials that I think could be valuable to you as you try to navigate getting onto wait lists and things like that. The first paper I'm going to recommend that everyone hang on to is that original diagnosis. This is most likely a very, very short piece of paper. It'll be given to you by whoever assigned you that initial diagnosis. So whether that is a testing facility, whether that is your developmental pediatrician, it could be a few different people, but it'll be a very short piece of paper that just says, "Hi, I saw Johnny today in my office and I diagnosed him with autism. Full report to follow." And that's kind of all it says. Um, a lot of times this paper can be very, very helpful for getting things started. So while it doesn't have the full paperwork that we would need in that neuropsych, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit, it does get the process started for you. You can start making referrals from here. You can provide this to people so that they know that your child does have the diagnosis, and you can start working with different companies and different services to start the process. So I think it's very valuable to hang on to. What's going to follow after this piece of paper is the full neuropsych evaluation done by the same providers, either a testing facility, a primary care physician. Um, and this is the piece that I find very, very lengthy and the most confusing to understand because there is no cookie cutter way that someone writes this piece of paper. And they're very, very long. Typically, I see them from 10 to 15 pages a piece. So they're very lengthy and full of, very odd things that you may never have seen before. So I'll break down briefly what's going to be in them so you know the sections to look out for, but please don't feel like you have to be an expert in what's in a neuropsych after this. You can let other people be the expert in paperwork, but I just want to make sure that you have, the brief understanding of what the document actually is. Um, It'll start off with a history section of your child. So anything that the evaluator thinks is noteworthy about their prenatal development, their early childhood, anything like that. And then it will typically go into a physical of your kiddo, their heart rate, their breathing, how they seem in the office that day. And then it'll go into the most important section, which is the testing. This is going to be the section that's most confusing to you, unfortunately, because it's full of graphs and charts and abbreviations of things. But this is the piece that the insurance company looks for to make sure that the testing was performed and make sure that the evaluator who's making the decision of whether or not your child does have a diagnosis of autism used testing that was appropriate to make that determination. So this is a very, very important section. And this is typically the bulk of the neuropsych itself. After that will be the impressions section. This is where the diagnosis typically lives. It might have other diagnoses mixed in there with it, but as long as it has that autism diagnosis in there, you can use that evaluation to start your search for some services and things like that. The next section may or may not be included, but it is a recommendations section. And this ties into the next piece of paperwork that I recommend everyone hang on to because it is very, very vital, again, to submit to insurance companies. This is a recommendation for any services that the evaluator feels is appropriate given your child's specific profile. So they may recommend ABA to you. They may recommend speech and language. They may recommend an IEP through the school. There's so many different things that they could recommend to you in this section, and all of those things become a medical necessity. So it's very important to have that section either within the neuropsych itself or separately as another piece of paper, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page when we go to submit to insurance, that this isn't a preference that you have, this isn't a want that you want your child to do the service, it's a medical need for them. And it creates a much stronger argument that things will get submitted to insurance and approved. And the last piece of documentation that I recommend everyone hang on to is an IEP or a 504 plan through the school. Um, while a lot of the services that you're going to be on wait lists for don't necessarily provide services in the school itself, I think it's really helpful to hang on to this document so that everyone is on the same page with the accommodations that your child is given during their school day, just because that's where they spend a lot of their time. We all want to be on the same page with what they have access to. Um, and I know I've talked a lot about what to keep, but I want to also give you a little bit of information on how to keep it because some of these documents might be very, very old. I've seen neuropsychs that are 10 years old, if not a little bit older. So, how do you save these documents when you're being given a lot of them and they're very dense and you might not know what they all are? My biggest recommendation is to save them on an electronic device, either a computer or a phone. Believe it or not, your phone actually has a file system for documents. Um, Both Apples and Androids do have this system, and you can save things directly to your phone. I recommend naming the folder something obvious so you don't misplace it. Could be something like Johnny's autism documents or Johnny's testing documents, whatever's easiest for you to find. I recommend having just a clear system for yourself that you know how to navigate. And a really wonderful part about technology nowadays is that you can actually take pictures and turn them into PDFs. This feature exists in the Notes app on an iPhone. And then I'm not sure where it lives on an Android, but I do know it's available. And you can take that PDF and add it into the file folder that you have because a lot of places, even though we do a lot of things electronically, they'll still give you paper copies of things. And I don't want anyone to panic that, they have an electronic file system, but now they've been given a paper copy. There's absolutely a way to add it in. And if you're more comfortable having everything paper in front of you, a physical copy, I recommend an actual physical folder just so that everything is accessible and in the same place for easy access. I know it sounds a bit obvious, but you'd be surprised how quickly you can misplace things that are dense and you don't want to read every day. So that's a quick overview of making sense of the paperwork. There's obviously so much more documents that you could keep if you wanted to and use the same system, but these are just ones that I think make a pretty big impact because a lot of people will ask for them. Moving on to everyone's favorite topic, insurance. It's very important to make your insurance work for you. Um, Treatment for kiddos with autism is expensive. Um, Double check with your insurance providers what they cover. You can give them a quick call. There's a number on the back of your card. Some cards it may be on the front, but it will be very clear it's a customer service number for you to call. And you just have a quick conversation with them. You say, "Hi, my child was recently diagnosed with autism, and their evaluator, their primary care, whoever recommended speech and language. They recommended ABA. What do you cover?" And they'll tell you exactly what they do. If you have a deductible, they'll tell you that. If you have a copay, they'll tell you that. If you have co-insurance, they'll tell you that. And then you can kind of game plan for what the service should look like realistically for your family. Because an awful thing that I've seen happen a few times is you wait on these wait lists. They're very, very long. You start the service, and then all of a sudden, the service is way too expensive and it becomes completely unaffordable for you. And you have to kind of take a pause and regroup. I think it's much easier to handle it having that information up front so you can work with your provider and say, "This is what my insurance looks like. Can you help me plan our sessions so that it makes sense for my insurance?" And almost every single provider will do that for you. All providers should. We absolutely do here, but it's something that I think is absolutely invaluable to know ahead of time what your insurance covers for your child so you can be prepared. And a nice thing in Massachusetts, I'm so sorry if you're watching from somewhere besides Massachusetts, but a nice thing in Massachusetts is that all children who carry a diagnosis of autism are entitled to mass health. This does not mean this is free, but they do pick up the copays, the deductibles, the co-insurances, things like that. You may have to pay Mass Health a monthly premium. You may not. It depends entirely on your situation, and Mass Health will determine that with you. Sometimes this is so much better than having to do the copays and everything like that, and sometimes it's not, which is again why you should make these decisions with Mass Health, with your primary insurance company, or with the Insurance Resource Center for Autism and Behavioral Health. I think I could spend the entire hour and a half we have talking about how much I love the Insurance Resource Center, but I will not do that to you. Um, they are a wonderful service that helps families who have an autism diagnosis or who are severely impacted by behavioral health issues figure out their insurance. So do exactly what I just advised you all to do, which is making sure that you understand your insurance, what they'll cover, and how to make sessions and things like that work. They will help you do that. They have so much knowledge about insurance. I think they have probably forgotten more than I will ever know about insurance. I can't recommend them highly enough. They've helped so many of the families that we work with here. And the absolute best thing about the Insurance Resource Center is that they are free. So don't be afraid to reach out to them, ask them questions, and make sure that your insurance is working for you in a way that feels attainable to you. I know I've talked a lot about other therapies besides ABA, and you all are here for an ABA presentation. That's because treatment for autism is not one size fits all. It's not cookie cutter. And like I said, there may be other services that are recommended to you. This is not an exhaustive list, and it's not a recommendation that your kiddo should be doing all of these things. But I did just want to touch base on all of the other services that your kiddo could use through their insurance. Um, the first is going to be speech and language therapy. The next is augmented and alternative communication. This is a device to help our nonverbal kiddos be able to communicate. Next is occupational therapy, physical therapy, targeted social skills instructions, small group or individualized academic instructions, specialized instruction, and then the last is pharmacobehavioral interventions or medication. So these are just some of the other services that you could be looking for as well as ABA, but please ask your primary care first. Make sure that this is going to be a good fit for your kiddo given their specific profile. Now, the next thing is how to actually find these services. Almost every single agency that you could want to work with at this point has a wait list for services. And so I do have a bit of advice that I give to everyone, and I recommend it to everyone who submits a referral to us, and that is to join multiple wait lists to increase your chance of faster services. Um, Unfortunately, it does kind of become a numbers game of who has an opening first. So if you're on the wait list for company A and company B has an opening first, you're more likely to get that opening. So I know it's a bit tedious for you guys as families and caregivers, but it is the absolute best thing you can do to increase your chances of faster service. Um, and how do you actually find these services? My best thing that I recommend to people is to Google what's in your area. Give a quick search, see what's around you. Google will be able to tell you the name of the companies, their address, so you can make sure it's a good drivable distance for you, and their phone number, so you can reach out and contact someone and set up that initial contact. The next thing you can do is to call your insurance company. That same number on the back of your card that's got the customer service line, they will have someone who is available to take a look at their registry of people that they work with and give you a list of companies that take your insurance, which is a very key part to getting services, is making sure that the insurance can go through. So that's really, really a wonderful alternative. The next, again, it's for Massachusetts. is the Massachusetts Behavioral Health Access, or MABA. This is a website where providers go in and update their own availability in real time. Um, they have a database, sorry, of multiple different services that you can look through. There's one for ABA that we update very regularly. There's so many other services on MABA that you can look in. You can put where you're located. You can put the age of your kiddo. You can even do your availability for a few of the different services, and it'll populate a list of services in your area that you can reach out to. And it'll also tell you their availability. So if they have two openings, you know to reach out to them first. Um, a lot of places will advertise that they don't have any openings because they're functioning off of a wait list. But you can also find places that have advertised an opening 2 or 3 months ago and know that their wait list is probably shorter than the company who has advertised no availability for the last few months. So it's a nice, easy way to be able to look into some services for you guys. The last option to find services is you can give me a call. I put my number here for you. Please don't panic to write this down quickly. It will appear again at the end. But this is my direct line. You won't have to go through a phone tree or anything like that. Give me a call. We will figure it out. I don't ever like to leave anyone high and dry. I would love if every single person could come work with us. I think we do absolutely fantastic work. But I understand that given our wait times, given people's location, just a myriad of different reasons, we might not be the best answer for you all. That doesn't mean you can't call me and I won't help you. I will look into things and at least give you a jumping off point for some services to look into because I do not like to leave anyone high and dry. This is not the time in people's lives for you to be feeling like you're alone on an island. So please give me a call. We will figure it out. The last thing that I want to go over before I stop and take some questions is the referral process. This is going to differ from company to company and from service to service, but it should follow the same pattern of submitting a referral, submitting all of the required documents, and then waiting to hear from whoever the intake coordinator at the company is. Um, I personally handle every single referral that comes in for ABA for Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I've also put our Rhode Island referral form there. Even though I don't handle it, I want everyone to have all the information. And the documents required do differ for Rhode Island. So wait to hear from the Rhode Island intake coordinator should you be submitting a Rhode Island referral. But the documents required for Massachusetts and New Hampshire are that full neuropsych that we talked about, that very, very long document. The letter of medical necessity that again might be included in that neuropsych, the current IEP through school, and then the physical from primary care within the last year. So as long as we have those documents, your kiddo gets added onto the wait list. And I will give you a call no matter what comes in. I'll give you a call and I'll say, hi, these are the documents that we're missing. This is the approximate wait time. Please submit the documents to me as quickly as you can. Or I'll say, hi, thank you for the documents. Your kiddo's on the wait list. This is the approximate time. I wish I could give kind of a generalized wait time right now, but we have so many different areas that I don't think updating you on the specifics would be helpful. So if you have any questions about specific wait times in your area, please give me a call, or my email is actually down at the end of the presentation. You can send me an email if that's easier for you. But I'd love to get you that information. It's very specific to each person. So I don't really have like a generic answer to say here. Um, that being said, that is the basics on how to do the referral process. Donna, did we get any questions that you think I can answer to the group, or were you thinking they were more kind of individualized?
Yeah, I have one question that I think might be a good thing to talk about right now. And it's, are there in-home coaching services for parents of children with autism?
Yes, there absolutely are. Um, There's multiple different services, but within ABA, what we can do is a parent training model. So we can go in and we don't have to do direct work with your kiddo. We can keep all of the ABA that we do to parent training or caregiver training, I should say. It's not just parents. And we can make sure that you are feeling supported and you have, adjustments that you can make to the home environment and everything like that. Just because you sign up to do ABA doesn't mean you have to do the full spectrum of everything. There's no hours requirement. You don't have to hit, an astronomical amount of time with us. If you need something much smaller than that, we're happy to provide it.
I actually have one more question that's kind of
Yes.
along that line, which is, do all children with an autism diagnosis need ABA services, or can one test out of needing the intense ABA service? I think you kind of just alluded to that a little
Yes.
bit, but if you could maybe expand on that, please.
Yes, that's an absolutely great question. I know, I think it's Danielle has this in her section, but not every autistic person is the same. Um, so there is no cookie cutter way to help your child with autism. If you and your pediatrician feel as if your child does not need ABA, they do not have to have it. It's not a requirement. I wouldn't say it's anything to test out of necessarily. There's no one test that we do that says, oh, yes, ABA, check mark. But it is based on the opinions of the family and the providers that already exist for the child. If they feel that ABA is not a requirement, you do not have to do it. There's plenty of other services that can help your child with the things that they are struggling with. Um, and you can take it from there and add and remove things as necessary.
And I can just add a little bit to that as well. Most insurances have their own specific um, stay on criteria for ABA services, basically benchmarks and criteria that the child needs to meet to be able to either say that they have graduated from the service or that they continue to meet the need to access the service. So a lot of those things will be determined by either the state that you reside in or your particular insurance. Thank you so much, Libby.
Of course, I am going to turn this over to Jess.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jess Culloo. I'm one of the ABA program directors here at Northeast Family Services in the Western and Central Massachusetts area. My slides are going to be, we're going to go off-roading a little bit. Some of you know me, so this is how I operate. Not only am I a BCBA and a LABA, I started as a parent. Completely different field, completely different undergraduate degree. Um, but my oldest daughter was diagnosed in 2007 with autism, specifically Asperger's syndrome, which is no longer in the DSM criteria, but some may say high functioning autism or low support needs autism. Wow, I did not know what to do. She wasn't in school. I didn't know what an IEP was. That was completely foreign. I had no idea what to do. So at the end of my neuropsych, the doctor put a list of resources, and I called every single one. Started at the top and just started going. And every time I called someone, I opened a new door. We have Google now. We didn't really use Google in 2007. We didn't have Facebook, it was MySpace, guys. It was that era. Um, so the diagnosis was super overwhelming. She was the same kid she was the day before, but the diagnosis changed the thought process and almost like facing a new thing. So one of the things I try to tell people when they talk about their child being diagnosed with autism is take a breath. It's overwhelming. You might not know a lot about it, or you might know a lot about it. Um, get the information, learn about it, ask people, ask your doctors. You can go online. There's a lot of forums and things now, but it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Most of us do. And that's something you're not going to understand every bit of it right away. And that's why we have these services, or we have different components, which is where I'm going to go in kind of less ABA, more what's in the middle. So my daughter was 3 years old, and I had an infant son, and my husband worked. Didn't have a lot of resources. We were really busy. I'm going to tell a few stories because I didn't know what to do. I remember going to Stop and Shop, and there were these carts. You could put the kiddo in the car at the bottom of the cart, and the baby in the top, and you go to the checkout lane, and she flew right out of the cart and dropped herself on the floor. I did not know what to do. I was by myself. I picked her up, cried through the line, paid for my groceries, and then just kept going. Other situations, when she was first diagnosed, I stopped going out. I stopped going to the library. She would go to those cute little programs because she would bolt, which just means running off real quickly, kind of maybe we know why, maybe we don't. It was scary because she'd go to the emergency exits. I stopped going to Stop and Shop and going grocery shopping because I didn't want to chase her down the aisles. I had an infant. She would take and touch everything and put things, as you can imagine, a whirling dervish is what I'm going to say. I stopped going to the grocery store. So what I started to do was, while I was trying to look for services, I didn't have anybody. So I stopped doing things. And one of the things, and we're going to kind of get into this, is that reaction of a person's very normal. I don't know what to do. Child with autism, a child with behaviors, and I just stopped. So that was something that happened with me. The other issue I ran into is my daughter wasn't in school yet. She was in a private preschool, as predicted, as I thought to do. She had the director there sitting next to her because she was so unsafe. You need to go get an IEP. What's that? How do I do that? So I'll never forget, for my 28th birthday, my mother paid for an educational advocate. And we'll talk a little bit about getting educational advocates. I just started opening doors when I made those phone calls on how to get things. I learned how to get an IEP. Didn't know what I was doing, but went ahead and got the recommendations. So these were things I didn't know that not all parents are going to know. It's okay to learn these things gradually, one step at a time. I had to do that, was just open one door, call that person, get their resources, go, and then build from there. So that was really important for me, not knowing what to do, making my world really small, and then trying to learn from there. So one of the things that helped me, and this is important, and you're going to see some similarities in my slides, support from family and friends or other natural supports. And I will tell you, working in the field, we don't always have that. There are families that don't have, maybe they live far away. Learning how to build those supports or meet those people and find those connections, helping people understand you, people who might have resources that have worked for their child. That was a big thing that helped me. And I say the next thing, and I say this when new staff start, or I say this when sometimes staff is having some stress with a parent. As a parent, you gotta give yourself some grace. And that is the word I use, because you're trying so hard to work on these things and you don't know things, and you can be very hard on yourself. Why is this? I don't understand that. I don't have the resources for this. So sometimes you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. It's okay. Little bits at a time, and give yourself some grace. Libby, you can forward the slides.
Sorry, technical difficulty.
I have notes, that's okay.
There we go.
So I just kind of talked about that, but this is new. My master's is in autism spectrum disorders, actually, with a concentration in behavior analysis. I went to school because of my daughter. I started learning. I started learning what an ed advocate was. I started learning how to get resources. You know what happened? I started having parents call me of all people, who didn't know what she was doing, to a point. And I said, you know what? The Elms College here in Western Massachusetts had a brand new program. I could walk. I only had one car. So I put on my backpack like a kid and I walked to the school and got myself a master's in autism spectrum disorders. The reason I'm bringing that up is not everybody understands what autism is. Not just us parents or caregivers who are learning for the first time, friends and family. They may not know what autism is, or they might have little bits and pieces, something they've seen on TV, or the one friend who has the one kid who's a certain way. That's up to you to decide as a parent who you want to share this information with. And Libby, we can move forward because this is fairly conversational. You don't have to tell everybody. You can go at your own pace. Sometimes a more simple explanation is enough. Decide which people you feel comfortable sharing with. In the beginning, I need my support system, my smaller family, my smaller group of friends to understand what to do before I started announcing it to larger family and friends. So I felt more comfortable. Different people need different amounts of information. Um, and that's what I kind of going to reiterate is share what you feel comfortable with. And the more you do this and the more you learn, the more you'll feel comfortable with. But some people are very open about talking about it, and some people aren't. And that's up to your comfort level. Um, so I can tell you a few pieces about autism. Some of you may really know this, but the three most characteristics that are in the diagnostic criteria are deficits in communication. We have kiddos who have full speech, can talk, but have some different speech patterns. To kiddos, a lot of them that we know who don't have any vocal speech, may use sign, may use pictures, may use a device like Libby was saying, some of the other services. And then some repetitive and restrictive actions. Some of the kiddos you'll hear, they might repeat something over and over again, something from a movie. They might physically, their body, they might do something, some people call it stimming. Those are the three criteria that are usually used with the testing to diagnose autism. So it's important to learn that and then explain it to people at your own pace. But they might not have the knowledge. So you can kind of say in your own words, well, this is what autism is, and this is how it affects my child because it's a spectrum. Um, so that's one piece of it. Then you have friends and family or coworkers, colleagues who might say, no, I don't believe you. That's not it. That can't be it. If you do this, that'll make it better. And in the beginning, you're like, oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Ouch. And then over time, you learn how to communicate with people or share with people. Look, this is what I need. And then they see and they're like, oh my goodness, I see what you're saying. I understand a little more about what you're doing. I was thinking this way. And once you have your support system, Libby, you can move the slides. Start asking for help. No, not one of us can do this alone. And I do see parents, single parents, sometimes with two kids. We see this and we're coming in and trying to help them. It's hard. Reach out to those friends, family. Maybe it's a school person. Maybe it's another provider, like Libby said, that might not be your ABA provider. But reach out to people for help because if you don't ask, you don't know what's available. And there is a lot available when you're not in ABA while you're waiting that your child has access to. And then similarly, going back to telling people things, you can also start laying down boundaries. What your child can and can handle, what you can't and can handle when you're working with your child or going out into the community with your child. It's okay to step back and kind of set those boundaries. Don't feel guilty. You're trying to do the best for you and your child. And that's where I say give yourself the grace. It's okay. It's okay to give boundaries. It's okay to have some challenging conversations. And I can always talk more about that just because I lived it and had people tell me, no, yes, this opinion, that opinion. Have you tried this? Do you think it's that? It was very overwhelming at first. But one of the things that came out of all this information and calling all these people and going to an IEP meeting and talking to a friend is I started learning what's available in the community. I live in Western Massachusetts around the Springfield area. So I started looking into things. My daughter was 3. She was kind of young for some of the programs to be involved in. So I started looking around, and I want to clarify, these are not evidence-based therapies. We're not talking about ABA. We're talking about community activities, ways to socialize, things to do with your child, things to make a community. We found therapeutic equine. We popped her on a horse, and she did once or twice a week. She would go to a ring. There were support staff around her. It was so great. It was so great to watch. Again, it's not an evidence-based therapy, but it was something I could do with her in the community with supports. In addition, it was on a sliding scale. I was able to pay half of what a normal place would pay for therapeutic equine. So I really leaned into that, made a great community, met people on the property, had friends. That starts to happen. You start to make a community. You start to get someone's phone number. Hey, we're going to take our two kiddos out to lunch because we both know the two kiddos might be up to something, but we understand each other. And that's where I started with services for my daughter. Music therapy. Out here, we have a pretty well-known music therapist. He would come to the schools, he would come to different things. There would be different things at the library, and I would go. And I would try to go to all of these things because some of them were free, some were on a sliding scale that I could afford, and a lot of it was meeting people and not feeling uncomfortable because your child's the one climbing onto the radiator or running out of the library or the other kiddo who's, doing what they're doing. It's like this kind of community of like, we all need a little bit of help between each other. Um, so there's a lot, and I'm going to get a little bit into them in a moment. But one of the things I find with some of these activities, they're not all going to work. It's okay to leave early. I've had to do that. I've paid for something, going to the ballet, going to the Nutcracker. Halfway through, my daughter had a tantrum. We had to leave. I didn't worry about forcing her through something, trying to make something work. I had to make a decision in the community to get through. So again, give yourself some grace. You're doing the best you can do. Look for the resources. Have your boundaries. Know what your child needs and what you yourself need. We can go back, Libby. So we can go back to the next one too. So exploring opportunities at your own pace is where I was kind of leading into. What's available in your community? We had a lovely resource out here called Community Resources with People with Autism. It's changed some names over the years. It's the first number I called. That's how I learned where these therapies were from. That's how I learned where these extracurriculars were from. And then I just called and I attended them. So look for what, like Libby said, you could Google it. Someone from a school could tell you. You might know someone in the community. There's so many different ways to find it out, but you need to seek it out. It doesn't come naturally most of the time. There's social opportunities. There's recreational, educational, and support-based. Some of them are designed for neurodiverse children. Some are not. But they can be adapted. And that's what's great about it is if you work with the right place, they might have a non-neurodiverse program, but they will say, you can come in and bring this person, or you know what, we could modify this for your child to attend. So seeing what's available in your community. And I just got a text recently with someone asking me this question. They had just moved out here and it was a whole list of questions. And I had to sit back and think where to start. Starting with school, starting in the community. Where do you go in the community? You've looked all these things up. And in this particular area, I was able to recommend Jewish Community Center out here. They have a special needs program. It's regardless of religion, it's a special needs program. They offer adaptive swimming. They offer adaptive camps, like summer camps, vacation camps, and additional wonderful other things. I recommended the equine therapy. We have a recreational therapy, kind of like an exercise group out here that's designed for kiddos like that, and many other things. So I was going through and researching and looking what was around here and kind of answering this text in pieces like, hey, start here. And then when you go from here, ask some more questions and they'll give you more options. I start local, and we can go to the next slide, Libby, on this. But specifically to autism, most of you have probably heard about Autism Speaks. That is the largest agency overarchingly talking about autism, not just ABA, but resources. information, articles, um, lots of different things that you can do, some safety components that I will actually look at when I'm working with staff, like, hey, let's see what we can get. Sometimes they're free. Sometimes you get these ideas and they're not these expensive things. You don't have to go out and spend a lot of money to provide for your child. That's a national one, but there's some more local ones as well. There's different autism support centers, neurodiversity advocacy organizations. Those will help with your IEPs. Those will help with getting other services. There is one called the Federation for Children with Special Needs. I often recommend that one because they are usually affordable or may not charge for their advocacy service. So I usually recommend for people to look that one up. And then, like I said, the parent-centered autism groups. These might be a play date at your house with all your fun friends. It could be something in the community. But if you go through these national and local groups, you will find these resources. And like Libby said, you can put in some searches. We have great search engines nowadays. Autism support organizations near me. Autism support groups in, and then your individual state. A lot of these organizations will say, oh, social skills group, here, here, and here. Inclusive recreation programs, like I was saying, and seasonal camps and community clubs. And my daughter, Nora, she did a lot of these. We did seasonal camps. We did recreation programs. We went to the community clubs. We went to these social skills groups. And I will tell you what a difference it made because we weren't receiving ABA at the time, but building a community, getting resources, getting me out of the house to get her to do stuff, and having her learn how to interact with other children. That was the best thing I ever could have done. Maybe we can just keep going with that. One of the most interesting things, and this came up actually 2 days ago, is some of those inclusive options. There's a lot of sensory-friendly areas. Movie theaters will do a Saturday morning showing of whatever the movie might be, Zootopia, with maybe the lights at a different level, maybe a different amount of people let in, support staff, movies. That's great. Park and recreation programs. They, again, might have different programs that you can do that are sensory friendly. Libraries, like I said, I always usually attend the libraries. One of the newer ones that are becoming more and more inclusive are your YMCAs and your Boys and Girls Clubs. And they will allow sometimes providers to come in to support, or they may adjust supports for you. And museums and theaters. We have a couple of small things because we're Western Massachusetts, but museums and theaters. And I will tell you, I got a text 2 days ago. The second biggest St. Patrick's Day parade is not in Boston. It's out here in Holyoke. And someone asked me if I could help with a sensory-friendly component of the parade. So people are really starting to understand the community of children with autism and what can we do so they can enjoy things and be a part of things. And we're just modifying things for them. So again, these aren't evidence-based practices, but these are how to get involved. And the more you get involved, the better your child does. Really, socially. It might be parallel play. It might be a friend that they make. You might make a friend out of it. I was very lucky to have had all those opportunities. And again, on a smaller scale, you could put in Springfield inclusive recreation programs, Springfield sensory-friendly activities. So there's a lot of different ways to search it. And Libby, we can go on again. The best way to do this. If you were coming over and talking to me, the first thing I would say is, what are other families doing? Because that's where the people are. You can ask schools, you can ask therapy providers, they're a wealth of information, but families' word of mouth is just so huge. And that's how I found out, again, about a lot more things. And you can ask, again, other providers. Libby mentioned speech, OT. They sometimes will tell you there's an adaptive playground. We have a few of those out here, which are really cool. Um, different sometimes speech will have social groups and they're done a little differently. OT can be not prescribed OT, but it could be that equine therapy. It could be that recreation program. It could be an exercise program. So maybe you're not there yet to receive services, but there are adaptive things that might help you fit some of these categories. So what I usually say is word of mouth, oh my goodness, is huge. And then, oh, what was I going to say about that? Just then utilizing your local community. That's what I was going to say. These big agencies are great, but those local agencies where you're going, where you live, are your support people. And I can absolutely help in Western Massachusetts if people have questions about that, but this was a lived experience, and this was a lived experience without knowledge. It was read read the neuropsych, Libby. What's the last page? Call A, B, C, and D. Okay, Jess called this one, which then opened the door to this one, which then opened the door to that one. So we went, and then we made friends, and then we moved along, and it's not everybody's experience, but I just started just going and keeping going. And I will tell you, I learned a lot about Go Diego Go in my time because that was the popular thing. But it was a lot of fun. Another thing is these services are not autism specific. We're talking about autism because we talk about ABA, which is the most evidence-based practice research intervention for autism. But some of these programs are inclusive in other ways, different disabilities. I think I mentioned things like therapeutic equine, swim programs. There's Lego clubs, there's coding clubs. There's a lot of different things that aren't just specific to autism. And that's a good thing to have your child surrounded by a variety of different people. I think that it's learning opportunity for them, and it's a safe place to kind of have your child. Um, and, I could probably keep going on that, but other things you're going to want to consider are age-specific groups. Sometimes when I'm making recommendations, I have to think, is that age? My 3-year-old daughter, I couldn't do some things. A 16-year-old might not want to do something differently. So you can Google, again, autism playgroups, early childhood, autism teen social groups, young adult autism programs. So you can also narrow down your searches as you get more comfortable learning about what's available. And Libby, I think we can go through about 2 more. And one of the things that I highly recommend, regardless of the level of functioning of child, our social skills group. And that's on our next slide. One of the biggest deficits is social skills in autism. It relates to communication. You work on communication because ideally, we want to be able to socialize with our friends, family, and the community. And attending them in your local area, attending them at schools. Sometimes schools will have a program during the day, lunch bunch. And then there are some virtual ones. We happen to hop for a few here. These are just examples of things that you can find out there. Lego group, which is like a build group. Like I said, teen groups, girls group, or something like that. Gamer group, younger children's group. And those help a lot because as your child gets older, they're going to more likely want to be with their peers and learn how to be with their peers more comfortably, shared interests, and feeling safe in that community. So I really enjoy those. And again, have had my daughter enrolled in a lot of those. And then on the next 2 slides, I kind of alluded to these, but National Autism and Neurodiversity Resources. Again, Autism Speaks is probably the most popular. It's definitely worth looking at. On that website, you're going to find information about grants. Someone brought that up. You're going to find information about grants, and then you can get help how to apply for that. I got the Doug Flutie grant one year that helped me pay for 6 months of equine therapy. I looked at it, I wrote up my letter, I applied, and I was able to get the money to pay for a recreational um, event. There's also some advocacy networks. I put in the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. This gives you some perspective on education and other things as your child grows through the lifespan. The ARC, which is not just autism, but it supports individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Again, recreational activities, social groups, family supports. And Parent to Parent USA, which connects caregivers with other trained parent mentors, emotional support, and shared life experience. That is the biggest question I get most of the time. Are there any adult support groups? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. That's hard. Sometimes you have to create them on your own. You find the kids in your class, your child's in a class, you know, parent A and parent B are also. And so, hey, do you want to come over? We'll have the kids get together. And you, like I said, you build that community. That is one of the hardest parts, is trying to find someone that you can relate to. And that's why we ask locally. And then the next slide, I also put a few things. These are Massachusetts related, so I didn't go fully into other states, but more resources that you can reach out to. One of the ones I know a few people on the panel have had students or clients participate is the Special Olympics of Massachusetts. And that is a very cool program that serves a variety of people and a variety of sports that otherwise you think your child might not be eligible for. Things like ice skating and bowling and all sorts of fun things. So I put some of these, but these are Massachusetts based. And that's kind of the community experience. I will end on a happy note. So my daughter's restricted and repetitive interests were animals. Go Diego, go. This is 2007. She is now 21 in her third year of college in zoology. So taking that preferred item activity, when appropriate, work into that. If it's cool, let your child explore that. If it's safe and it's obvious, you know, something like that. We went from animal rescuers to now college animal rescuers. So this took work, but I went to everything. I socialized with everybody. I called everybody, whether it worked or not. And that's part of what we do here when we do in-home support. Obviously, when we have ABA in place, there's someone to talk to. But these are the other pieces that we can help parents find, because these are questions we get a lot of the time when we go into parents' houses. And giving that grace and reducing that guilt and a positive attitude when working with parents really goes a long way, because they're going through something that other people aren't going through, and that is unknown. So when I work with families, I try to remind themselves, like, one step at a time, let's go through this. That is the best way to be successful working with a parent, finding the resources, and then helping your child reach the level of potential that they can. It's a little bit of off-roading here, but because I lived it, I can kind of speak to that. Does anybody have any questions?
We've got a couple that I want to throw out to you, Jess. I know you mentioned a little bit about some of the grant programs that are available. We specifically got a question, are there any free grant programs for advocates to help with IEPs? If you could just kind of run through some of those items again, please.
Sure. I don't know all of them, which is where I would have someone go into Autism Speaks, but Federation for Children with Special Needs. That is the one I recommend the most. These are advocates that are not, they accept varieties of payments. It's a sliding scale. There are some who will do it for free. And I tell people to go there first. So when it comes to advocacy, grants, you have to do a little more research on, The reason I got the Doug Flutie grant is because I was on Autism Speaks. Friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you apply for that?" And I was like, "Oh, what? I'm not going to get that." But I wrote a letter about recreation and what my daughter was doing, and I got it. So again, doing a little bit of research, a little bit of word of mouth, and then asking for help drafting your letter if you need help doing so. But there's a lot out there. It's just gathering the information.
And if I could throw in one item on
Yeah.
that, if you happen to reside in the state of Massachusetts, there's a really wonderful resource called Mass Advocates for Children that does offer free advocacy services. There is an application process, but if your family is found eligible for that service, you can access advocacy services for your child with no out-of-pocket expense, which is really lovely.
Mhm.
We had one other question that I'm going to kind of relate to this particular area because you were talking a lot about community integration and kind of supports and things that are available. One of the questions we got was, how do you teach or talk about ableism in the workplace and get the accommodations that are needed for a job? I know a lot of the things that you talked about were like transition into the community, and might that be something you could elaborate a little bit on, Jess?
Yeah, you could pick that apart in a lot of different ways because ableism is a bit more of a newer term. But as we get kiddos who are getting older and aging out of some of the systems, they're moving into jobs or different things. You you need to speak up and you need to uh, disclose what you want to disclose. And there are laws protecting that, and that the ADA specifically can make those accommodations at your job with most reason. Obviously, physical things may change, but that is something that can be and often is something people do. Someone with autism who might need a little different amount of time to do something or process something a different way, or might need a little heavier support and have a mentor with them. That is definitely something that is supposed to happen. And we should not be turning people down or away, which is where the ableism comes in because they don't fit the specific criteria. Um, so, you can disclose the amount of information you disclose, request those accommodations. I find most places have been very reasonable during my experiences.
And if I can just add a
Yeah.
little piece of information to that as well, the ADA that Jess references, the Americans with Disability, it's a Section 504 Act, and a lot of times we find that individuals on the spectrum may qualify for both an IEP through school as well as having a Section 504 plan developed. And that Section 504 plan is not something that ends with their educational journey. It is something that can follow them into other opportunities such as employment. So if there are accommodations that are needed that are outlined in that Section 504 Act, that's a great document to hang on to as well, and support those requests for accommodations.
And to build off of that too, actually, those can be used at college.
Mhm.
Accommodations in college. So you're not just done at 22. You can bring those to college, and those accommodations can be put into place there as well. But I want to thank you all for listening to my story and kind of the different pieces that we do. But there are things out there. Ask the questions. That's where you need to start. Give yourself some grace, then ask the questions. So I hope I can help some of you do that. Thank you for listening. And now we'll turn it over to Danielle, who can give you some more structured ABA approaches that you can do before services start.
Thank you, Jess. So as Donna said at the very beginning of our time together, my name is Danielle Ashley-Silva. I'm a clinical supervisor for our ABA program in the Southeast and metro areas. And Jess and Libby touched upon a plethora of things that families can start to focus on once they've received that autism diagnosis. But I'd like to speak a little bit more towards things that you can do to support your child and your family kind of within your own home. They are things that you can take with you, but they're not resources or people that you necessarily need to search, locate, and contact in order to determine whether or not these are effective for you. So, Libby, we can go to the next slide. So I think it might be safe to say that at this point, most families may have already placed a referral for ABA services for at least one agency. And it might feel like time has stopped at this point. But this is really the best time to deepen your understanding of what autism means for your child. Autistic brains and thinking processes can be very different from non-autistic brains. Logic, executive functioning challenges, and genuine confusion are often mistaken for emotional manipulation and callousness. So a child might laugh when their peers are getting in trouble or reprimanded, but not to be mean or callous. It's often out of relief that they're not experiencing that same distress. Some autistic people have difficulty interpreting pain signals, while others have different sensory needs. So for those individuals, noise-canceling headphones and tinted glasses might help filter out sensory stimuli, increasing their ability to focus and attend. And stimming can offer comfort and predictability for some autistic people who may also be diagnosed with anxiety, despite the stigma that stimming can be disruptive and embarrassing by so many others. So autistic people often have differences in learning styles, and it's important to understand each child's preference to help them be successful in their life. We can go on to the next slide. Thanks, Libby. So the four main learning styles associated with autism are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and reading and writing. So visual learning is learning with your eyes, and those learners do best when they can see information through reading, looking at charts or diagrams, and looking at pictures. They can demonstrate difficulty when the information is presented to them auditorily, however. And this learning style is very common among autistic children. Auditory learners are those who learn best through listening, and they would prefer an audiobook than reading it to themselves, or prefer to have a project explained to them instead of getting the information off of a paper or a syllabus. This learning style is considered to be less common among autistic learners, but still a style that we often associate with some of our autistic learners. Kinesthetic learners are those who learn best through movement and touch, and they're considered hands-on learners. They do best by doing things and seeing things or hearing about them rather than seeing or hearing about them. They often enjoy sports and physical activities and can easily become bored in a traditional classroom. Kinesthetic learners with autism may be interested in taking items apart and putting them back together. And finally, our reading and writing learners learn best through literally reading material and then taking notes on it. They do best when they're given textbooks and handouts and other ways to access written information that's new to them. Many of them enjoy taking notes on what they have read so that they can read and then reread it again later. These learners do struggle with classroom discussions, presentations, and hands-on projects. We can go on, Libby. So the goal for ABA is to improve an individual's quality of life by increasing helpful, positive behaviors, such as communication, social, and daily living skills, while also decreasing harmful and disruptive behaviors, such as tantruming, eloping, and other unsafe behaviors. ABA is built upon the principles of behaviorism, and that theory of learning emphasizes the role that environmental factors have in shaping the behavior of a person. So the thought is that those behaviors are learned through interactions with the environment, the people in the environment, and can be changed by altering those interactions. A very characteristic model of ABA is the ABC model, and that's a foundational tool that we use to identify and understand the environmental factors that shape behavior. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, the A in ABC stands for antecedent, literally what happens in the environment before B, the behavior occurs, and C, consequences, literally what happens after the behavior took place. And that's how we try to identify those environmental factors that contribute. So the process begins with a comprehensive assessment to understand the child's strengths, challenges, and specific behaviors. This involves observations, interviews with parents and caregivers, and standardized tools. The results guide the development of individualized treatment plans, and those goals are based on the child's unique developmental stage, needs, and family priorities. I emphasize that because we don't make these decisions for the family. We take their input, and the goals for their child are based on what they feel is important and necessary given our recommendations. So those goals often focus on improving communication, social skills, adaptive behaviors while reducing challenging behaviors. Continuous data collection is necessary to monitor the child's progress, while ongoing data analysis guides the decisions to adjust interventions and revise strategies when progress is just not being made. Parent training, which we touched upon a little bit ago, is essential, and it does empower caregivers to reinforce the skills being taught during therapy if your child does receive that direct therapy component of ABA. So it reinforces the skills in real-world settings, ensuring consistency that leads to better long-term outcomes and behavior generalization. Parent training bridges the gap, bridges the gap between clinical sessions and daily life, and reducing challenging behaviors while promoting independence. Next slide, Libby. So here we're going to touch a little bit about structure and routine. You're going to probably hear a lot more about that from me from the rest of our time together. So for individuals with autism, predictability is essential in reducing anxiety and promoting a sense of control over their environment. By establishing routine, you provide your child with a clear framework for their day-to-day activities. The routine can include regular meal times, bedtimes, getting ready for school, and other structured schedules for school, therapy, and other things that might occur in their life. So the structured environment provides individuals the necessary support for learning and development. And with those supports, the learner can better navigate daily activities and tasks. This structure helps them understand what's expected of them and reduces the likelihood of sensory overload or confusion. Social stories are narratives that are used to help children with autism navigate situations that they may find difficult or new and they've never encountered them before. So these stories are typically written from the child's perspective and describe what will happen, why it happens, and what they can do, providing a clear and structured way to navigate social situations. I'm ready for you, Libby. Here I've included a very brief example of a social story. I found it online. It literally gives very clear instructions with pictures that could be relatable to the child about what to expect going to the store with their mother to go grocery shopping. So the goal of using social stories is to just provide a layer of predictability, knowing what to expect, so that it's not a surprise. I've also included a link for healthcare social stories just to kind of give a little bit of an example that with some searching, you can find a plethora of stories online that may not be tailored to your child, but could help you navigate a new situation. If you're in need of support and you don't have access to any while you're waiting for ABA services to take place. Um, Next slide, Libby. Um, Also, supportive transitions definitely can be helpful for many of our learners, um, and they're often very challenging for many autistic people. So, in addition to the visual schedules, which create predictability, we encourage the utilization of a timer to indicate a clear end of one activity, especially when transitioning from a preferred activity to a less preferred activity. So, an example of that could be we're playing before bedtime, and bedtime is getting ready for bed is difficult. Incorporating that timer, first then language, what's going to happen next, can help to iron out that transition so that you're experiencing less tantruming if that's the case at that time of day. Next slide, Libby. Okay, so this slide, I'm just going to kind of go over what the visuals and the arrows, they represent prompting hierarchies. And the arrow all the way to the right, at the top, we see least restrictive, and it's moving in the direction of most restrictive. That speaks to one of the common prompting hierarchies in ABA. And I think parents can relate to this and they don't even realize that they're doing it. So I think many caregivers get caught in the trap of just doing too much for their children in general, instead of allowing them to learn by doing and making mistakes along the way, and providing the appropriate level of support for them to be successful and independent. And I realize life is busy. Sometimes it's just easier to do it yourself, but you're missing out, and your child is missing out on those opportunities to learn, to persevere, to deal with disappointment. And it's hard to watch your child struggle and be unsuccessful. So I definitely understand how we as parents get caught in this little trap. But there are two hierarchies of prompting that we use in our therapy. So the first is the least to most, which is depicted on the far right. And sometimes that's referred to moving up the ladder. It's designed to increase learning. So this begins with minimal assistance, gradually increasing the level of prompting based on the individual's needs. And it encourages the learner to attempt the task independently before providing support. So an example of that could be teaching a child to tie their shoe. You might allow them to attempt the task on their own and then offer slight cues, working their way up to hand over hand, providing full physical prompting if that's what your learner needs. So if we were to flip that arrow like a little spinner on a board game, and then the arrow we're facing least restrictive, that would represent most to least prompting, or moving down the ladder. And that aims to increase the independence of the learner. So with that approach, you would provide the most restricted prompting initially, and then systematically reduce or fade as the learner becomes more proficient. So this is usually used when tasks are new or very complicated. So an example would be brushing your teeth, teaching your child to brush their teeth. You might start off with hand over hand, and then slowly over time, now your hand is faded to their wrist. And then you move to the elbow until they're able to brush their teeth without any of that prompting. Libby. So aside from all of these other things that we've talked about, we're going to touch a little bit more about safe and supportive environment. It really ties into consistency and predictability for our autistic children and learners. So creating the right environment for children with autism can significantly impact their growth, comfort, and development. And understanding their challenges and strengths is the foundation for creating the supportive space. These children often experience heightened sensory input, which can lead to distress or shutdowns. So reducing unnecessary noise, bright lights, and clutter creates a calming atmosphere, and choosing colors like soft blues and greens will not overstimulate the senses. And incorporating familiar, soft textures in rugs, pillows, and furniture can aid in promoting tactile comfort. Maintaining structure it's back, we're talking about structure again, is comforting to many children with autism, and dedicated spaces provide that predictability for them. Dividing the environment into clear areas for learning, playtime, relaxation, and daily routines. Adding visual support such as floor tape or colored bins designate where items belong and which area is for what activity. And then labeling storage areas with pictures or icons is especially helpful for nonverbal children. For some of our autistic learners and children, we do worry about safety. Like Jess, her daughter, like to just take off and, with no warning to mom. So that causes some safety concerns. And I think one of the more common ones that we're faced with is the elopement or bolting. So they may wander or run without awareness of the danger that they could face by doing so. So to prevent those unsafe exits from happening, we recommend using door alarms, childproof locks, or fencing. And those preventative tools can make the environment both secure and developmentally appropriate. I know some families are even starting to incorporate an air tag on a watch band if the child will tolerate it, where elopement is a significant concern. So that's definitely a strategy that some families are starting to use if their child will tolerate that on their wrist. Providing materials like fidget toys, Play-Doh, textured mats, or water tables that match the child's sensory preferences can be helpful with self-regulation, calming, and motor skill development. And for comfort, you would include weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones, soft lighting, or bean bags. Allow the child to use this area as a retreat to calm down and recharge. Sleep disturbances are also common in children with autism, making bedtime routines essential for them. Ensure that the sleep space is dark, quiet, and free of stimulating electronics and clutter. A sleep-friendly environment improves rest and overall well-being. When children have input in their environment, they feel more ownership and comfort in their space. Let them help choose the colors, the decorations, where to place toys and other items in their space. And if a child avoids certain textures and sounds, adjust accordingly to make the space more comfortable for them. What might seem minor to us, like a tag on a pillow or buzzing from a light, can actually be very disruptive to them. Go ahead, Libby. And this is actually, I believe, one of the most important things that you can do with your child that may have been diagnosed with autism is immerse yourself in their world and follow their interest. What I mean by that is follow their lead at home during playtime. Get on the floor with them. Observe what captures their attention and join in on their activity rather than trying to change what they're doing because you don't understand it, or maybe your other children didn't do these things. Get yourself involved in what they like. That helps demonstrate acceptance, and it builds the trust between the two of you. And just because we're their parents doesn't mean those things naturally exist. We have to practice it. We can also imitate their own actions and behaviors during play. So you can mirror the things that your child's doing. Like if they're stacking blocks, you stack blocks. I know that's just one example, but it makes you a more interesting play partner, and it encourages them to notice you because you're doing what they're doing. Engaging in sensory play, that utilizing toys that offer sensory feedback, such as Play-Doh, water play, or textured items. They help to regulate nervous system and provide comfort. So not all autistic children are going to want to play with Play-Doh. Not all autistic children are going to want to play with water play. Some autistic children may not like getting wet. You have to find what your child likes, and that will just be through trial and error. You can also engage in games that don't actually involve verbal conversation. And so some examples of that would just be like rolling a ball back and forth, chasing each other in the yard, playing hide and seek, building a tower together. It does a few things. It creates opportunities for reciprocity, but it also helps your child learn to recognize that nonverbal communication that many of our autistic learners may not pay attention to or be aware of. So those are good opportunities to be mindful of when you're engaging or playing at home with your child. So this is tough for many of us adults. We've forgotten what it's like to be a kid. We're very much caught up in a very busy world with adult responsibilities, but channel your silly side, channel your inner child, get on the floor, be energetic, and be animated. Make yourself the most interesting thing in the room to draw their attention to you. If you establish yourself as that for your child, they're going to want your attention. And not to be a broken record, but make predictable routines. Playing should be in your predictable routine. It shouldn't just be when time allows for it. It should be part of your day. And I know that that's really hard for parents sometimes because we sometimes forget the value of it, but for autistic children and non-autistic children, this is how kids learn. It is through play. So, I mean, this really goes for all the parents out there. Make time in your day to play with your kids. And I feel like that's all I have to say about that.
We've got a couple of questions for you, Danielle. Perfect timing. Okay, one of the questions that we have is, does scripting ever get better with age?
So, in all honesty, I would say that really depends on the learner. Um, for some, yes. For some, no. It's not really a blanket crystal ball kind of projection that I think any one of us here can offer necessarily.
Absolutely. Thanks.
I can add to that, Donna,
Oh,
just a
sure, of
little
course.
bit. Um, Scripting is very interesting. We could have a whole talk on it, but the more social skills groups that your child is in, the more time in that they're learning, sometimes very specifically how to communicate with others. It doesn't take it away, but it might reduce it around social opportunities. So you're able to teach them different skills when communicating with people, and then they may script on their own outside of that group, but you can kind of teach them a little bit separately.
Thank you, Jess. I have another question that I'm actually going to kind of tag Libby into. The question is, should a parent who has not completed a neuropsych eval, have an understanding or be saying that their child has autism? Kind of thinking back to the importance of that documentation that Libby mentioned earlier. Libby, I don't know if you want to kind of talk a little bit about why it's so important to have that diagnosis actually on file.
Yes. So while the paperwork doesn't necessarily mean that your child, if you've never had any testing done, it doesn't mean that your child does not have autism. They absolutely could. However, with getting supports into place, it is absolutely essential to have that neuropsych done. Because we need a paper trail to be able to submit to insurance in order to get them involved. Like I said, as part of my section, treatment is very expensive. And insurance companies don't necessarily want to pay all that money if they don't find it necessary. And so having that paper trail of we've been to the doctor, it's been confirmed is so, so, so important. If you have never had any testing done for your kiddo and you are positive, you're probably right. You are the expert in your child. We're just the expert in the paperwork. It is so, so, so important to follow up your correct opinions with that paperwork to make sure that every other thing that you need to be in place for your child to flourish can be there for you.
Thank you, Libby. And I think that's a great way to, to broach that conversation with that caregiver. Not only is it a way to access services, but it also, confirms what it is that you as the caregiver are feeling is going on. And we have one other question that kind of is getting at some recommendations for intervention, specifically for aggression. I do want to kind of give a little bit of a caveat here that anytime you're dealing with any potential unsafe behavior, you really do want something very individualized that's addressed during treatment. And I'll open this up to the panel, but my general thought on aggression is that all behavior is some form of communication. And if you're able to, have an idea of what it is that your child's trying to access through that aggression, there are ways that you can, help them be a more effective communicator that might be able to decrease that aggressive behavior. But if anybody else wants to throw their thoughts into that one as well, please feel free.
I can give a little bit of information. Number one is safety. You have to keep your child safe, yourself safe, anyone else in the area is safe. Obviously, that is the number one priority. If you can observe, we have a few little different data sheets that we like to do called ABC. It's just what happened, what was the behavior, and what happened afterwards. If it's safe enough to do so, and you can do that, you can start seeing, well, this happened because they wanted that, or this happened because they didn't want to do that. When we're seeing that multiple times, and like Donna said, it's probably communication. I don't want to do that. I don't like that. Or I want that item. Or I want your attention. But without having the communication skills or perhaps a social skill to access that, the easiest way to get those things in their current skill level is to engage in aggression. That's what we find very often.
Thank you, Jess. I think that's the end of the questions that we had in the Q&A and the ones that were submitted to us prior. We do have all of everyone's contact information here for all of your panelists. Please feel free to take a screenshot of this. When I tell you we genuinely love answering questions, we mean that. We are happy to be a support, to share any information or resources, or clarifications or any further questions on any of the items that we discussed today. We are more than happy to be a resource. Again, if you are interested in accessing the recording from today's presentation and the slide deck, please email Gary Dorsey. He will be able to pass that information along to you at the conclusion of our talk today. I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. We so appreciate your attendance, your attention to this important topic. We hope that this was beneficial and that you're able to walk away with, some things that will be supportive to you in, whatever application would be helpful to you and your family or those individuals that you work with. Thank you so much again, and we appreciate your time.